First, my name is Zach Brand. I'm the host of the Founding Philly podcast. We dive into the stories behind Philly's exciting startups. We are fortunate to have Dave and Catherine, and we'll be getting into the early stages of the startup journey. So to kick things off, Catherine, would you mind giving a quick introduction to the audience, and then we can jump in?
Sure. My name's Catherine Griffin. It's such a pleasure to be here tonight and see some familiar faces and a lot of new ones. I'm the founder and CEO of Impactable. We're based here in Philly, and we do social impact analytics for startups, funds, and brands. And I'm looking forward to sharing my story with you guys.
Hi, my name is Dave Becker. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CampusESP, and we support parent and family engagement at colleges and universities. We work with over 300 schools who are communicating with over 7 million parents. We have a team of 50, one of whom is here, Mira. So say hi. And before that, I also was a startup founder for a company called Beacon and Lively, which was a wearable tech startup that failed. So I'm happy to tell any stories about that. And then also I was the COO of Scally, which just sold a couple weeks ago, which was exciting for me. And excited to tell my story.
Thank you both. So to start off, I think everyone has ideas as entrepreneurs, want to be entrepreneurs, right? Not every idea is essentially a business. So Dave, you could kick this one off. How did you ultimately come up with CampusESP?
It was at a bar. That's always how it seems like these things come up. So my background was in education technology. It's what I knew. And when I was testing out the idea for CampusESP was really around student engagement and engaging students to support retention and graduation. And so I did what you're supposed to do, which is talk with customers, talk with your audience. And one of the first schools that I went to was Abilene Christian University, which is in middle of nowhere, Texas. And I was at a bar. I have a picture of the moment where the CIO is like, there's a lot of apps that really engage with students, but the students aren't even in the systems anymore. It's the parents who are in there. And I'm Gen X. I did not talk to my parents at school, and I was blown away. And I was like, let's take a picture of this moment in case this is a real idea. And that was the birthplace of CampusESP. After that, it was really about testing the idea, building the platform, researching it, and going from there. But it really did start with leveraging my network and thinking about just talking with customers that had a perspective for a problem worth solving.
And I really get into the helicopter story, but I have a question for that. So we'll pause for that. But I want to make sure that you share that one.
Yeah, so Impactable was not something I dreamt up one day. In fact, I walked into it reluctantly, truth be told. I led a fund and accelerator for about 8 years prior to launching Impactable with hundreds of early stage social entrepreneurs, so companies using technology to address social and environmental challenges. And I led 2 global innovation initiatives, one with Bloomberg Philanthropies focused on urban innovation in partnership with the city of Philadelphia and Wharton, and then the second with the Obama administration focused on climate adaptation innovation alongside over 80 different cross-sector partners. And it was over the course of these 2 programs that those partners started asking questions about impact potential. How much impact are we actually making by investing in these companies, right? Just like a fundamental question. And so we sat down with the entrepreneurs. We asked them very simple questions about their impact, which is by the whole reason why they founded these companies, right? They couldn't answer them. We looked around for solutions we could offer them, we could draw from, and those were really designed for much later stage, often like corporates. And so long story short, in the absence of alternatives, we developed the scaffolding behind what is now Impactable, practiced it internally, had no intention of offering it more widely. The companies that used it came back to us and said they were winning pitch competitions and closing rounds and accelerating their growth. And the investors that saw the analytics came back to me and said, we want these from every company in our portfolio, and you should really build a company around this. And I was like, I'm going to go get a real job. I'm not your guy. And I was given some funding in 2019, some grant funding. from local foundations and sort of an angel and like a swift kick in the butt, and spent about a year doing my own due diligence, just like talking to as many people as I could to figure out whether there was a real need, whether our approach was interesting, whether people would pay for it, who, how much, user journey, all of that stuff, and formed Impactable at the tail end of 2020 and went from there. So it was really in response to market demand and like a problem. Like there was no way to respond to what was very clear, and I might add like kind of what I think is an important question. And so, yeah, I think having worked with a lot of entrepreneurs in my prior career, I do see that like it's really tempting to like have a solution and go find a problem, as opposed to finding a problem, learning it intimately, and building a solution for it. And so I really wanted to be careful to make sure that like the solution that we thought we had was actually solving the problem. And I think that is just a discipline that can be really tough once you fall in love with a solution. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think something that's a key to both of those stories are the fact that you both were in that industry before ultimately building your company, right? Scali, in the ed tech space, Obama administration, right? You were doing this type of work. So I think something that's interesting now that you hear a lot about is, do you necessarily need to have the background or have been working in the industry that you ultimately build in? So I'm curious to get both of your thoughts on how important is that to have the background and have been building in that before ultimately taking the jump in that industry.
I think domain expertise is absolutely critical. I'm working in data analytics. I don't have a data analytics background, but I've worked intimately in social impact, impact investing, and entrepreneurship. So like industry, any given thing is in, you might be in software, right? But you're also in education. Like you span. No, I'm just saying you might not have had, I don't know. I didn't have a software development background. I didn't have a data analytics background, but I knew the problem inside and out from multiple perspectives. And I think starting a company, the founder gets like hyper scrutinized for a number of reasons. And I think domain expertise and credibility, as well as, the network that comes from having domain expertise, is absolutely critical in my opinion.
Yeah, you got to know what you're doing, right? I mean, I'll give you an example of what didn't work. Like I mentioned this company, Beacon and Lively, that was my first entrepreneurial venture. And that was a startup. It was a wearable tech. I haven't practiced my pitch in a while. It was a wearable tech jewelry for women. What the heck was I doing there? I knew nothing about that at all. I had to hire a jewelry designer. I had to find a brand expert, somebody who did printed circuit boards, like so many different things. And honestly, it was so fun. It was so great. And I'm still proud of it because I still pay $10 a month or whatever it is to have the website running, because I'm very proud of it. But it was not my jam. It was not what I knew. And ultimately, it took me going back to Scali, being their COO, and then kind of, I don't know, like realizing that I had to go back to ed tech, which is what I knew. And I would say, there's a lot of younger people here, but like at some point, you go through like kind of like a midlife crisis kind of thing. And I think Beacon and Lively, the wearable tech, was like my midlife crisis. I was like, I need to switch gears and do something I've never done before. Some people buy like an amazing car or something crazy. I bootstrapped a jewelry tech company, and it was great. I would do it over again. I would definitely do it over again, but it's not a high percentage win. And so the biggest thing you have as an entrepreneur that you're taking on is a risk. Like risk is what you're taking on. So you have to find ways to de-risk your company. And the best way to do that is with your knowledge or with your network. And it seems like you're very networked, and that really helped. And it helped me as well in the ed tech universe, having that network.
I have checked out the website, so I can attest that it still is up. But Catherine, so you mentioned going out in the market, kind of looking for a problem, kind of chasing that. You have a great solution, this idea, you're running after this problem in search of something. In our conversation, you mentioned this concept of inside out versus outside in thinking. And I think that is really important when it comes to understanding that problem that you should be solving. So share what that concept really means.
Yeah. So outside in is so. What's the big problem with it with a bigger company? Like, there's so much process. There's so many hoops you have to jump through. These are all the things that we're rebelling against, and the reason why you're probably wanting to start your own business, right? Which is just to get closer to the customer. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You wanted to solve problems, and the problems you want to solve are not the company's problems. You want to solve customer problems. So that is outside in thinking. You have to take what's outside, basically the customer, and make sure that you're addressing their problems. The tendency with a bigger company is that there's always something that you're doing to satisfy some stakeholder internally, or there's politics or whatever. It's annoying. But outside in thinking is thinking about designing for your ultimate customer, your audience. And I'll also say, I think that especially with younger people on my team, that pertains to everything. So like maybe you're in marketing, you can't lose sight of the audience, right? Who are you trying to influence and what is their perspective? So outside in thinking is always about thinking about your customer first.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with my customers, like obsessed with them. I can't talk to them enough. One thing, definitely not an original thought, and I have no idea who to attribute this to, but I heard it repeated by Andreessen Horowitz on some Clubhouse event I attended during COVID. And he was like, the biggest thing we look for in founders is humility, strong opinions, loosely held. And that is a practice, and one that, I try to do every day. But I can't talk to my customers enough. Like, yeah, part of the luxury of working at a startup is that you can be so close to them, but there are also a million distractions, and it gets really easy to, get caught up in the day-to-day.
I see what I'm saying. I still do demos. Our company's 50 people. I should not be doing demos, Mira. And the reason why is because it gives me energy. Like, I'm hearing about their problems. It's the quickest way to figure out whether or not the product resonates. And that's the kind of energy you should be looking for. If talking to customers does not give you energy, like, seriously, reconsider it. They have to bring you energy when you're talking with them.
Can you share your helicopter story of how that compares to outside in versus inside out?
Yes, Zach, I will share my helicopter story. So we have one piece of IP, one, thing we paid a lawyer tons of money to trademark, and is, when you think of parents at college level and their involvement, you think of helicopters, right? Helicopter parents, right? So, and at the start of CampusESP, before I really understood the research and what we were doing and how it was helping, I came with this amazing tagline that we give helicopter parents a place to land. And it was, thank you for some laughter. I appreciate it. Although it seemed forced, if I'm being honest. And so we trademarked it. We took it to conferences. We would have a big helicopter. Audience loved it. They would be like, oh, can I get a picture in front of the helicopter? And it was the worst tagline I could have ever picked, because it completely devalued everything we were doing. It made it like a joke, right? And so we couldn't charge for a joke. The real value of what we're doing at CampusESP is, if a student struggles, they're more than likely going to talk with their parents or their family members to get the support they need. It's not about their grades. It's about mental health or about finances or something like that. And it's about making sure that their parents are partners in their education. We always hear student success. Well, student success for a lot of families is family success. But we focused on this give helicopter parents a place to land. Again, the only IP we have at our company, complete failure.
I would love to see a picture of those conference pictures that you have.
We have them.
So during the early stages of the startup journey, some may have access to different resources. depending on interest from investors, applying to accelerators, incubators, things like that. Catherine, I know you just finished up at Techstars. Dave, you were part of Dream It early on and a few others. So share about that experience and what it's like being a part of an accelerator.
Yeah. So, founding a company is not easy. And I had been hustling for a good 2.5 years before joining a Techstars program Q1 of this year. And it was a decision. I mean, it's expensive. Like, they take a good chunk of your company. And I was thinking about it really hard. I talked to a lot of my advisors about it. Didn't want to just sort of limp into it. And my thinking was that, the brand behind Techstars is a value add and the network is immensely valuable. But what I didn't anticipate cherishing as much as I do now is the peer network. Everybody talked about the peer network and I was like, yeah, that's cool, but like not really why I'm doing this. And it has sure been the other startup founders. It just normalizes the experience. I'm right where I should be, with the collapse of SVB Bank and First Republic. Of course, that's affected the fundraising environment. You never know if it's you, and to just sort of compare notes with people, it's just been incredibly valuable. And we're like family now, for sure. But, there were some of the basics that were covered around financial modeling, right? And ideal customer profile, just, some basic stuff. The network is insane. There's something called Mentor Madness, where it's basically speed dating for 2 days with like 70 like baller mentors from like Meta and Uber and Square and, tech wizards and marketing gurus. And it was just awesome. Definitely a fire hose and really, 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 really fast. Actually, before we even started, there was a webinar and they talked about playing like a champion. And my family had to all be, Notre Dame, but play like a champion is like a Notre Dame thing. And they talked about just leveling up and like the pace of, your day and just taking you from like a 2 to like a 10. I don't know. Just really increasing the speed of progress through acceleration. And that was definitely my experience. I would say for anybody interested or anybody that's been part of Techstars, Demo Day was definitely, it was a wonderful experience. Ours was virtual. And a lot of the investors in the network were a little bit later stage. So there wasn't like immediate pre-seed funding, but I had an opportunity to establish relationships with a network in like the Series A level. And I'll have an opportunity now to cultivate those relationships and demonstrate that we can do the things we say we think we're going to do. And, that's absolutely invaluable. So, as a founder, you have to be resourceful. You have to make something out of nothing. And I was also part of the Tory Burch Fellowship, which came with a small grant and a network of women, much more remote. But I think any resources you can find like this, particularly that come with a community, are well worth the time it takes to apply and the research it takes to find them. And I'd be happy to talk with anybody who wants, ideas.
I'm assuming most people have heard of Philly Startup Leaders, and they have an accelerator program, and that's been in existence for a while. I can tell you that because we were in this first version of the accelerator, which I think we're the only surviving company from that accelerator. And that's where I met my co-founder. Like literally, CampusESP would not exist if I didn't meet James Bright at the PSL, the first PSL accelerator. And he was working on something else. And I already told you I was working on this crazy bracelet idea, but I also was working on CampusESP in the background. And when the bracelet idea fell through and the Scali team moved to California, I was like, James, I'm looking for a tech guy. And we had built that relationship at Philly Startup Leaders. And that was a very, very early stage accelerator. I was also at Dream It, and I was in the Towson incubator. And I'll tell you, the main value I got from all of these is that it is very isolating to be an entrepreneur. It's very isolating. I think that's probably your biggest challenge, which is you believe and you're trying to get other people to believe. And when you're talking with them, they will love to hear your struggle. They'll be like, tell me, oh, it's got to be so exciting, but so challenging, right? And then it just gets really tough. You're like, who do I tell this stuff to? I'm just trying to like create a list of who I'm going to raise from or what customers and pitch deck. And this is version 280 of the pitch deck. And some pain in the ass investor just told me my fonts were too small on the pitch deck and all these different things that nobody else can relate to. And it was kind of like therapy when you get into these accelerators. You're like, hey, let's just talk about your problems. And then you realize, hey, other people have the same problems as you. It was great because the one thing we have in Philly is we have a community of people that are ready to rise to the challenge. There's not a huge funding scene in Philadelphia, and the community was here to support me. And I think CampusESP succeeded because we were based in Philadelphia.
I am curious. CampusESP is pretty much fully bootstrapped company. So for those companies out there that are going through fundraising and it's challenging and they see these posts on LinkedIn, the $20 million Series A, and think that's the way to do it. But there's other ways like bootstrapping that may not be as glamorized, right? So what has that experience been like?
So most people who bootstrap do not choose to bootstrap. They failed at fundraising. So I have given at least 200 pitches in the Valley to Andreessen Horowitz and everybody with a puffy jacket in the room and everything like that. And it's tough. You might not raise money. And if you don't, you better have a revenue strategy, right? I mean, it's like you need to have revenue, and customers need to see the value in what you're creating. So I don't know. I think there's a lot more companies that are bootstrapped than people realize. And so much time and distraction and energy get focused on fundraising. And if you can do it, go for it. But if you can't do it, focus on the customers. That's what I'd say. And I feel like there's a lot more bootstrap companies out there than you realize, especially in places like Philly as well. That's where I think most companies succeed. They're bootstrap companies out of Philly.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I responded to something you said about the Philly scene, which is they rally. I gotta say, the Philly community is incredible. I had the benefit of having been a part of the ecosystem for some time because I ran an accelerator here, got to know a lot of folks, built relationships over time. People sort of got to know me, and push comes to shove. Ben Franklin stepped up, the Pact crew, Broad Street Angels, Robin Hood Ventures. I mean, I can go on. And I was just given opportunities, and some of them worked out and some of them didn't. But funding is definitely tough, no question. Philly is very much focused on life sciences. It is what it is. But I have to just shout out the Philly community because I felt so grateful to have founded a company here and have a community. So just wanted to mention that. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think there are so many different types of capital. Bootstrapping versus VC, those are polar opposites. There's also, of course, grant funding. There's, revenue-based financing. There's all kinds of different, loans, of course, low interest loans. There are a lot of different ways to get over, sort of the valley of death or whatever, right? When you just need to demonstrate progress. But fundraising strategy is a thing. There are so many moving parts, both within a company. When's the right time? What do I need to, in order to make a compelling pitch to investors? And then, of course, there's like the macro environment, and things are always moving there too. So it's a whole process. And I think I had the privilege of sitting on the other side of the table and watching some baller entrepreneurs, complete our program, go through some others, go on to raise money, and I read about them in the New York Times. I can sit on the other side of the table, take a look at a pitch and provide feedback. But when you are in the hot seat, it is a different ball game. It is a different ball game, and I've definitely been humbled for sure. So lean on in. I mean, I've leaned on advisors. You get so, I think, involved in what you're doing that, at least for me, I lose perspective. Do the words I'm saying make sense to you? Is this the right way to tell this story? And so having some fresh perspective is absolutely invaluable. And yeah, I have 200 versions in my deck. It's just never ending, and so it's a big decision. We're raising a pre-seed round right now, and we've been able to make some progress. momentum is real. I would say that about fundraising. Once you get the lead, the others follow, and it moves a little bit more slowly. So,
Okay.
yeah.
The lead is the key. So if you're raising a round, whatever that means to you, you got to have somebody vet your company, and it's got to be somebody who's credible. So everything comes down to the lead. And finding a lead is about finding one individual who believes. It's really tough, but focus on the lead. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, if you do have revenue, there's plenty of tax and grant programs out there that would shock you. In the state of Pennsylvania, there's something that's called the KIZ. I don't know, does everybody know what the KIZ is? If you don't, look it up. Keystone Innovation Zone tax or credit. There's plenty of like non-dilutive funding out there, especially if you have something that you're just looking to scale. That first market fit, that's a little tougher. You got to find a lead to believe, I say.
So we have a few more minutes left, and I do want to see if anyone has questions. But to wrap up, going into Q4, what's next? What's your team focusing on as you look ahead?
Yeah, so we are releasing some new products, some new software. And so I'm like very much focused on customer validation for this next thing. We just brought on a new hire, which is extremely exciting. We have marketing campaigns that are launching this month. Shout out to John Wise, who's here, who's our marketing guy. He's absolutely amazing. So it's going to be a really exciting Q4. The fundraising scene kind of goes a bit dormant over the summer. So everybody's coming back to life now in September. So releasing new products, telling the world about it, raising money, living the dream.
Yeah, I mean, just growth is the name of the game. I think you guys are probably in it because you want to get, your fingernails dirty or roll up your sleeves or whatever the metaphor is that you want to do. But like, you want to get close to the action. And then at some point, you got to like give that up and hire people that know what they're doing. And that's the transition point that I'm at, which is almost 50% of our team are in their 20s. We have a big spirit of mentorship at CampusESP, and it's served us really, really well. But we need to grow, and to grow, sometimes you need some experience. So it's really tough letting go. And so that's probably my biggest challenge right now, which is finding people who can help take us to the next level, but also grow people internally who are going to, continue to believe and be these amazing culture warriors for CampusESP. And that's really what's helped us grow in those early stages as well.
Well, thank you both for sharing insights from both your journeys. If you're interested, they both have been on the podcast, so check the podcast out for the full episodes of their stories. But would love to see if anyone has any questions for Catherine and Dave. We can take a few minutes. Hey, right here.
Thank you. My question is that you probably know that 2021 was unbelievably generous in terms of investments. 2022 was a huge drop. 23 probably is going to be worse. What do you think are the trends? When are we going to get back to the previous level, like 2021, or we're not going to get there ever? Because it looks like investors not want to do the valuation of startups as big as it was before now, or ever.
I have no idea. I mean, if we have some board members who are very experienced, and they're always like perspective. They're like, it's not that bad right now compared to historic trends. So I would say don't use it as an excuse.
Couldn't agree more with that. I think investors want you to do more with less. Valuations are definitely coming down. I think investors are interested in investment opportunities where revenue is your path to revenue, as opposed to some of the sort of hypier, if that's a word, trends around, blockchain, for example. So I think there's just more aversion to risk. And I don't want to use that as an excuse. You just have to figure out how to do more with less. In terms of when it's going to get back to normal, I don't know. I've heard some people talk about 2024. I'm not holding my breath. I'm focused on setting clear milestones that I need to hit in order to raise the next round and figuring out how to hit them with the amount of money I'm able to raise. But I can tell you, this is one of the reasons why the peer network was so valuable. lots of my peers started out raising $1 million, $2 million. They're coming in with less than that, and they're making it work. And I thought that might be sort of a tail between your legs moment, right? It says something about my ability as a founder if I'm not able to raise the round that I wanted to raise. And that's sort of not the perspective. I think there's a general appreciation for the macroeconomic situation, and it's just not an excuse. I don't know.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Well, thank you for being here and putting this together. Catherine, specifically for you, but of course, if anyone else has any thoughts, feel free to chime in. But you sat both seats. You started off as like, maybe not investor, but like on that side of the table at least. And then you transitioned to the founder world. So if any investors are tuning in, what do you wish that they knew about being in the founder seat? Or I guess, what do you wish you knew about, being in the founder seat when you were an investor?
Everybody talked about how hard it is, but you can't know until you do it. And so there are a lot of investors who have experience as a founder. And I think, I don't know, you can't tell somebody that. You kind of have to do it. I think a lot of investors I've spoken with have empathy for that. And a lot of them, when I talk to them these days, start off with the value that they bring to founders. I just spoke with one yesterday that must have had a bench of like 300 operators out in the world who are former operators, and they just kind of quarterback these resources. So I don't really have a great answer, or my answer you can't really impart it on another person, if that makes sense. I'm sorry, I feel like that's elated.
All right, that is all. Please stick around, hang out, have some drinks. Let's connect, let's talk. Thank you again, Dave, Catherine. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming.